Sukkah, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Aleph. Lulav ha-gozel v'ha-yovesh posel. A stolen lulav or a dry lulav is posel. Explains the Bartanura. The posuk says, "Ulekachtem lochem." You should take for yourselves the Abba Minim. It must be yours. Continues the Bartanura, even if the owner of the lulav has given up hope of ever receiving this back once it was stolen, nevertheless, havi mitzvah habor ba'avera. This person has the lulav only through an avera, mitzvah habor ba'avera, and therefore it's possible, can't be used. Yovesh dry explains Tosfos Yontef on the Gemara, based on the Gemara, that we find, referring to the esrog, it's called the pre-eitz hodor. The word hodor is used in reference to the esrog, hodor meaning beautiful. And the Gemara learns that all the Abba Minim therefore must have this quality of beauty. And a dry lulav would not be considered hodor. What is considered a dry lulav? There is a machlokes, Tosfos Yontef brings. Some say if it would crumble, it's so dry it would crumble by a nail, fingernail next to it, it would just crumble. Others say, and that's the generally accepted view, that if it had turned white, the albinu ponov, if the lulav had turned white, that is considered yovesh, would not be hoda, and therefore would be possible. Shel asheira v'sher ir hanidachas posel. Two further psulim of the lulav. Shel asheira. What is an asheira? Explains the Bartanura. This is an ilon hanevad. If this tree from where the lulav came had been worshipped, ilon hanevad, form of idolatry, then the lulav from that tree would be possible. Similarly, if this tree, the lulav, came from a tree from Ir Hanidachas, a city that was led astray. This parsha in Parshas Ra'eh, which discusses the Ir Hanidachas, is where the majority of a city had been led astray by members of that city, and they are worshipping idols. Then that whole city needs to be destroyed, as indeed does the Asherah tree. It must be burnt, and therefore it's considered now, as it has this din of being burnt, whether it's the Asherah tree or the Er Nidachas, everything in the city is burnt. Therefore it is considered as if it doesn't have the required shear necessary for a lulav, and therefore it's possible. The Mishnah continues, Nektam Roshay, if the top of the lulav had been removed. Nifrutsu olav, if the leaves themselves have been severed, removed from the lulav, says the Bartanura, Ve'enon muchuborim elo al yedei agida, they can only join with the lulav, they can only be mechubarim to the lulav if they were bound together. That as well is a psul, as was the niktam roshay, just the top part removed. And both those examples would be possible. However, nifrudu olav, explains the Bartanura, if the leaves are still connected to the lulav, however, nifrodim lekan or lekan, they are spread apart on top, but they're still connected. Kosher, the lulav would be kosher, and that would be fine. Rabbi Yehuda says, if we have this lulav where the leaves have spread apart on top, ya'agdenu milmala, bind them together on top, and under those circumstances it would then be kosher. And the Bartenura says, Ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, that one does not necessarily have to bind them together. It's already kosher prior to that. Tzine har habazel. These are... Stop. Stop. Back. Tzine har habazel. These are thorn palms from the Iron Mountain. They are kosher. What does this mean? Explains the Bartenura. Certain places where we found the dekolim, the lulovim, they had very small leaves. Explains the Bartenura, they will still be kosher even with these small leaves, as long as, if the leaves are long enough, as long as the leaf reaches are long enough to reach the base of the next leaf above it. Lulav sheyesh bei shloisha tefachim, a lulav that has 3 tefachim, which is the same height as the kosher hadas or harova, kedei lena'aneh bo, in order to be able to shake the lulav, explains the Bartenura, it needs that in addition to the 3 tefachim, which means an extra tefach, it would then be kosher. So the shear of a lulav would be 4 tefachim. Rabbi Akiva Eiger mentions the Ram that says, why doesn't the Mishnah just say a lulav needs to be 4 tefachim? And he explains that even if the hadassim or the arovas are taller than the minimum shear, one would always need an additional tefach above the height of the hadassim and the arovas. And that's why the Mishnah mentions this additional tefach. The shear of a tefach, Reb Chaim Noah says that's 8 centimeters, Chazon Ish 9.6 centimeters, 1 tefach. So according to that, the lulav needs to be 4 of those. Rav Moshe Feinstein's Zatzal's shiurim are slightly in between those 8 and 9.6. But the shear of a lulav would be 4 tefachim. It's worth, however, noting that when we discuss the 4 tefachim of a lulav, this height goes up to the top of the spine, where the top leaves start to protrude onwards. It does not include the height of those leaves that go beyond the top of the spine. If one looks carefully, one can find the spine at a certain height, and above that the top leaves protrude. The 4 tefachim, and indeed the extra tefach above the height of the hadassim and arovas, are from the height of the top of the hadassim up to the top of the spine of the lulav. That concludes Mishnah Aleph.